In this video, we're going to look at some handicappers on Twitter last night that were not profitable, but then apply what I call statistical properties to their selections and make them profitable. Super fascinating video. My name's MGCovers. Greatly appreciate you guys tuning into this video. Big shout out to all the new subs. We've had a lot of new subs here in the last 3 days. Greatly appreciate you guys tuning in. Don't forget, after you sub, follow me on Instagram. I put out a ton of content over there as well. We have something called Free UFC. We give out one free UFC play, generally on Monday or Tuesday, by our UFC handicapper, Eric. And then also I have Free Fridays where I give out all my lines for all sports on Fridays. And there's a link to follow me on Instagram as well. So super fascinated about this video. And if you don't know what statistical properties are, let me define that first. Because if you use this term in the sports betting space, no one will know what you're talking about. That is a term that I came up with. A statistical property I define as a fact about that sport. And let me give you a simple one. In NFL, teams that win also cover 80% of the time. Or you can say it, teams that cover win outright 80% of the time. And an example of that would be the NFL playoffs. Teams that won and covered went 11-2. Very strong statistical property. So application of that would be you should never play a favorite on the money line. If the line is -3, you would simply lay the points, because if they win, there's an 80% chance they're going to cover. Same deal with when you're playing a dog. If the line is +2.5, you should not take the points. You should play them on the money line, because if you believe they're going to cover, there's an 80% chance they will win outright. That is what a statistical property is. And that's using the definition that's using the NFL example. In this particular one, we're going to look at an example from college basketball from last night. So let's pull up this card here. Now, first off, this was not profitable. But believe it or not, this handicapper actually had a really good card. This was a really good card. He went 2-2, but he was not profitable. And when we finish with this video, I'm going to show you how he can make the same exact plays, but structure it, applying statistical properties, and make it profitable. So we'll review this first. He played Tennessee money line. And one quick tip, without getting too much, I don't want to go off track here, but just one quick tip, play all of your plays the same unit. Don't play a 2-unit play, 1-unit play. A lot of people will apply what they call the Kelly criteria to determine which has more value. Billy Walters talked about this in his book, where he would have a 5-star play, 4-star play. But for the majority of you, just play every play the same amount, wager the same amount on every play. You're better off doing it that way. Now, so you had Tennessee money line, that was a loss. Kansas State +3.5 was a win. Mississippi State money line was a loss. UConn +4 was a win. Now, before we dive into the details of his card, let's look at this chart here. Now, I don't want to show this yet. Let me block this out so that you'll focus on what I'm teaching. Okay. Teams that won and covered, or covered and won outright. Now, this was from last night, 2/11. And this is college basketball. Teams that won and covered, or covered and won outright, 72% last night. Right? Now, and let me explain that too. Let's go over here and look at last night. So what I mean by that, and let's just use bookmakers closing line. You can use opening line. It's going to end up this same percentage, whether you use opening line or closing line. For example, Ohio was -4.5. So they won the game and also covered. Akron won 105-92. The line was -14.5. They won, but did not cover. Because if you apply 14.5 to 92, that would be 106.5. So they won but did not cover. Buffalo +1.5. They covered and also won outright. And then I'm not going to go through all these. Let's look at this next one here. East Carolina was +2. They covered and won outright. Okay. So applying that for all the games for last night, you can go back and do the math on this as well. Went 26-10, 72%. Now, there is one extra step you can apply to this, and I actually teach that you can just narrow down this criteria. And if you apply this, I can't reveal this, this is proprietary information, but if you apply this, you can actually get it to 81%. So if you take this one concept that I teach and apply it to this statistical property, it would have gone 27-6, meaning teams that won and covered, it would have been 81% last night. So super fascinating, right? Now, let's look at his card. Go back to his card now. And this is a pretty common mistake a lot of people make. So instead of laying the -2 or 2.5 for Tennessee, he played it on the money line. Most people do this. Why? Because they think, hey, instead of playing -2.5, I'll play the money line. So that way, if they only win by 1, I will still win my wager. They think that that's the better way to approach it. But what they don't realize, in the event of a loss, what happens? So instead of only losing -110, now he's down -1.42. Because again, going back to the concept that I'm teaching here, if you believe Tennessee is going to win, then there's an 80% chance they're going to cover. So that was a loss. So he's -1.42 there. Kansas State, again, this is a really good card. You'll see that in a second. +3.5. He wins that, but he only wins 1. So not only did they cover, they won outright. And then Mississippi State, he does the same thing there, -140. That was a loss. And again, I'm using the closing line for bookmaker, but you can use whatever line you want to. It's still going to end up a losing card, okay? But just where I got those numbers from, full disclosure. And then UConn was +4. He won that one, so that was 1. So if you add all that up, he lost -0.82 units. Now, this is super fascinating. When you look at a card the way he has it structured, well, he has 4 teams here, 4 plays. The only way he can profit is if he wins 75% of those. He has to go 3-1 to profit. That is a statistical fact based on this card and how he handicaps. He has to hit 75%, has to go 3-1 in order to profit. Okay? And if you look over here, his average juice is -125. Why is that important? That means if you add up his lines, and I'm assuming -110 on all the spread plays, meaning this will be -142, -110, -140, and -110. That averages -125. And if you convert -125 into a win probability, it's 55%. So at -125, your break-even point is 55%. So if you average -125 juice on all of your plays and you hit 55%, you will make, drumroll, $0. So in order to profit this way, you're going to have to hit 57, 58% to have a decent ROI. Very, very difficult to do. Now, let's apply the statistical properties that I teach, which are, again, facts about this sport. So if we believe Tennessee is going to win, or Tennessee's going to win, then we simply lay the points, and same with Mississippi State. We believe Kansas State is going to, quote, cover, and UConn is going to cover, so we play them on the money line. So let's look at this and see what happens. And drum roll, and now he's profitable. So how this would look, Tennessee, he would lay -2, -110. That was a loss, so -1.1 units. And you could see the big difference there. So that's a 30-cent difference of loss. So instead of losing -142, only loses -1.1. And then Kansas State, instead of gaining just 1 unit, he gains 1.43 units. Mississippi State, -2.5. Instead of playing -140, that was a loss. So instead of losing -1.4 units, he's only losing -1.1 units. And then, of course, UConn, instead of playing UConn at +4, you play UConn the money line, 1.5, 0.73 units gain. So his break-even point for the wagers above here is -125. Here, if he would have wagered and incorporating what I call statistical properties, he only has to hit 50% to turn a profit. Is it easier to hit 50% in sports betting, or is it easier to hit 57, 58% in sports betting? It's easier to hit 50%. So again, you could see clearly applying statistical properties to your handicapping, you can drastically improve your wagers. Now let's look at this next one here. And again, I'm not criticizing the loss. We all take losses, myself included. He had Marquette minus 18.5. And I'm not saying that Marquette was a bad play, meaning like you might be a sharp. Based on your model, Marquette had a ton of value. And based on how you handicap, you win long term. And therefore, that's why you played Marquette. So in using that premise, then Marquette would have been a good play. However, based on a statistical property I'll show you here, this is another statistical property. And of course, I can't reveal this, but I actually teach this. Based on this particular statistical property, before the game even tipped off, Marquette only has a 44% chance of covering the 18.5. So before this game even tips off, applying this statistical property, only a 44% chance of winning, as opposed to playing into a higher statistical property. So based on, if I was coaching him or he was a student of mine and his model said to play Marquette, he would look at the statistical property and this would have been a no play, saving him, the loss in this particular case. Now, I want to close with this because I think this is very important to understand this. If you want to learn to ride a bicycle, the only way to learn to ride a bicycle is you have to actually get on the bike and fall down, get back up, and continue to try. It is an experience-based process, meaning you could read a 100-page book on how to ride a bicycle. It would not help you because balance has to be felt. You have to learn that through experience. Sports handicapping is different than learning to ride a bicycle. It is a knowledge-based business, which means if he would have sent me his plays before they started and I'd said, you need to apply these statistical properties, instead of having a losing day, he would have had a winning day. So however you want to acquire knowledge is up to you. Now, I will say the difficult part in our industry, and this has been sort of the buzz in the sports betting space, majority of people that wager on sports, I like to say it's 95% lose long-term. The majority of people that teach this business lose long-term or have no clue what they're doing. So it's very difficult to find a way to learn the business. The way I started was I read a lot of Bob McCune books. Bob McCune was a sports handicapper in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. I think he passed away in the early 2000s. I read his books, still a long process, but at least I was learning from, quote, a sharp. Now, the way that I set up my business, for $50 a month, you can have access to all of my coaching videos that explain these statistical properties, access to all my lines for all sports for $50 a month. Very inexpensive. And I use the Planet Fitness Netflix model where it's very inexpensive to join, but you get a ton of value. But and there's a link to join in the description of this video. But however you do this, you cannot learn sports betting through repetition of wagers. At some point, you have to acquire knowledge. That's the only way you can do it. Hope this video helps. Like it. Greatly appreciate you guys tuning in. Talk to you guys soon. Peace.